What if I told you the biggest economic event of your lifetime already happened, and almost nobody noticed? Not a crash, not a panic, not a headline screaming emergency. Just a quiet number, released on a boring afternoon, that sealed what happens next. Because while everyone was arguing about politics, wars, and elections, something far more dangerous was set in motion. Something invisible, something slow, something that doesn't feel like an attack until it's too late. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Inflation doesn't arrive like a bomb. It arrives like fog. You don't see it. You don't hear it. You just wake up one day and realize your money doesn't work anymore. And the scariest part, what you've experienced so far wasn't the real thing. That spike in grocery prices, that rent jump, that feeling that your salary is chasing something it can never catch. That was only the warm-up, because the system hasn't absorbed what was already created. Not even close. Money doesn't hit all at once. It moves in waves. Quiet ones, strategic ones, designed ones. First, it floods assets. Then, it leaks into daily life. And finally, it drains the middle. That's not a theory. That's a pattern. A pattern older than modern governments, older than central banks, older than the dollar itself. Every empire that printed its way out of a corner told its people the same story. This is temporary. This is controlled. This is necessary. And every time, the result was identical. The wealthy didn't panic. They positioned. The poor felt pain immediately. But the middle class, they stayed calm, trusted the system, and got erased quietly. That's why this video exists. Not to scare you. Not to sell you hope, but to expose a cycle that's already moving whether you believe in it or not. Because what's coming isn't about prices going up, it's about value going down. Your savings, your wages, your future purchasing power. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. In the next part, I'll show you why inflation doesn't strike evenly, why asset prices explode before consumer prices, and how that delay is exactly what traps the middle class every single time. This isn't economics. It's survival math. Here's the part nobody explains clearly, because if they did, people would panic. Inflation doesn't hit everyone at the same time. It never has. It moves through the economy like a controlled burn. Quiet at first. Selective. Almost polite. And that delay is not an accident, it's the trap. The first wave never touches groceries. It never touches rent. It never touches wages. The first wave goes somewhere else entirely. Assets, stocks, real estate, collectibles, anything scarce, anything financial, anything already owned by people closest to money creation. That's why, when new money is created, markets don't crash. They surge. Prices go up, and everyone cheers. News anchors call it a strong recovery. Politicians point and say, "See, it worked." But what they don't say is this: that money hasn't reached the real economy yet. It's still trapped at the top. This is where the conspiracy-adjacent truth lives the part you're not supposed to notice. Because money enters the system through very specific doors. Banks, financial institutions, government contractors, asset markets. It does not enter through wages. So by the time prices at the grocery store start rising, the people at the top have already repositioned. They've already bought, already leveraged, already converted cash into things that inflate. Meanwhile, the middle class is still holding money, saving responsibly, waiting, trusting. That's the delay. And delays are lethal in inflation cycles. By the time the second wave hits food, gas, rent, the narrative shifts. You're imagining it at supply chains. It's temporary. But here's the brutal reality. Once consumer prices rise, the damage is already done. Because wages lag inflation. Always. Raises come late. Promotions come late. Adjustments come late. And even when they arrive, they never catch up. So the middle class starts bleeding. Slowly. Not enough to revolt, not enough to riot, just enough to exhaust. Savings shrink without being spent. Buying power evaporates without disappearing. Life gets tighter but not dramatic enough to trigger alarms. This is how inflation avoids resistance. No single moment, no single villain, no single collapse, just pressure. And here's the part almost no one understands. This is still not the final wave. There is a third wave, and history shows it's the one that finishes the job. Because when inflation moves from prices into debt, into government obligations, into the currency itself, that's when systems break. In the next part, I'll reveal the four-stage pattern that every currency collapse in the last 2,000 years followed with no exceptions in, exactly which stage we're in right now. Once you see it, you'll understand why this isn't speculation. It's sequence. There's a reason governments never teach this in school. Because once you see the pattern, trust disappears. Over the last 2,000 years across empires, kingdoms, and modern nation-states, every currency collapse followed the same four stages. Different names, different centuries. Same script, no exceptions. Stage 1 always looks like stability. A strong currency backed by something real. Gold, silver, land, productive output. People trust it. They save in Italiano. They plan their lives around it. This stage can last generations. That's why people believe it's permanent. But permanence is an illusion. Stage 2 begins quietly. Costs rise. Wars, social programs, political promises. The math stops working. Taxes aren't enough. Borrowing hits limits. So governments reach for the invisible solution. Debasement. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just enough to relieve pressure. A little more currency. A little less backing. A promise that it's temporary. Most people don't notice because the currency still works. That's the danger. Stage 3 is where things turn ugly. Debasement accelerates. Trust erodes. Prices start rising faster than wages. This is the middle-class killing zone. If you hold cash, you lose silently. If you live on wages, you fall behind annually. If you save responsibly, you're punished. Meanwhile, those closest to money creation don't just survive, they consolidate. They buy assets from desperate sellers. They absorb real wealth at depreciating prices. They grow richer while society feels poorer. And finally, Stage 4. The reset. A new currency. A restructured system, a fresh start. But here's the lie hidden in the word reset. It doesn't reset wealth evenly. By the time Stage 4 arrives, the transfer is already complete. Millions are poorer. Thousands are richer. And the system starts, again built on the ashes of the middle class. Now here's the unsettling question. If this pattern has repeated for 2,000 years, if it never failed, if it always followed the same order, where do you think we are right now? Because Stage 1 ended decades ago. Stage 2 didn't end it, accelerated. And Stage 3 doesn't announce itself. It feels like normal life, but harder. And that's exactly where people make the fatal mistake, assuming pain equals stability. In the next part, I'll take you into the first real historical proof from and show you how a trusted currency collapsed so slowly that citizens didn't realize what was happening until their lifetime savings couldn't buy bread. And the similarities to today are uncomfortable. Rome didn't collapse in a single moment. It collapsed in slow motion. And that's why almost no one escaped it. At its peak, Rome controlled the most trusted currency on earth. The denarius wasn't just money, it was confidence. Trade flowed. Savings mattered. A working citizen could build a life. Then the costs started rising. Wars at the borders. Political. Favors. An expanding empire that demanded constant funding. Taxes couldn't cover it. So the emperors made a decision no citizen voted on. They changed the money. Not the name. Not the appearance. Just the substance. The silver content was reduced slightly at first. so slightly most people never noticed. The coin looked the same, spent the same, felt safe. That was stage 2. More coins entered circulation. Goods stayed the same. Prices began creeping upward. Decade by decade, the debasement accelerated. Each ruler needed more funding than the last. Each promised stability. Each left the currency weaker. By the time the people realized what was happening, the damage was already irreversible. This is where stage 3 took over. Prices exploded. Savings evaporated. Fixed incomes became death sentences. A Roman merchant could work his entire life, save carefully, and still watch his wealth turn into almost nothing without ever making a single mistake. But here's the part history books whisper instead of shout. Landowners survived. Those who owned farms, buildings, livestock, real assets watched their value rise dramatically. Not because the land changed, but because the money collapsed. The middle class vanished. Rome transformed from a society of broad ownership into an empire controlled by a few elite families. The currency didn't just fail, it rearranged power. And once that happened, Rome was already finished. Not because of barbarians, not because of corruption, but because the social foundation was destroyed. A society without a middle class cannot stabilize itself. Now pause for a second. Replace silver coins with digital dollars. Replace emperors with central banks. Replace debasement with stimulus and liquidity. The mechanism is identical, and Rome is only the first proof. In the next part, I'll show you a modern example where this entire process happened, not over centuries but in less than 4 years. Families destroyed, savings erased, and a nation psychologically scarred forever. And the warning signs, they were all there in the beginning. If Rome was slow motion, this was a Germany, after World War I, deadened to Luke, doomed. It looked wounded but functional. The currency still existed. People still worked. Shops still opened every morning. That's what made it so dangerous. Germany owed debts it could not pay. The math didn't work, and everyone in power knew it. But there were only 3 choices: raise taxes brutally, cut spending violently, or print. They printed. At first, it felt like relief. More money meant bills got paid, workers stayed employed. The illusion of normal life continued. But inflation isn't linear. It's exponential. At first, prices rise slowly so. Slowly people adapt without realizing they're adapting. A little less meat, a little smaller apartment, a little more overtime. Then something snaps. Prices stop rising monthly and start rising weekly, then daily, then hourly. Savings that took decades to build lose meaning in months. Families who did everything right were wiped out not by bad decisions, but behind teachers, engineers, civil servants, the backbone of society. And here's the part that still terrifies economists. Some people got rich. Farmers who owned land could trade food for anything. Factory owners paid off massive debts with worthless currency. Anyone who borrowed early and held real assets walked away clean. Debt disappeared. Assets remained. That's the transfer. And once it happened, it couldn't be reversed. The psychological damage lasted generations. Trust in institutions collapsed. People stopped to believe in systems could protect them. Extremes filled the vacuum. All of it triggered by one decision: print instead of admit reality. Now, here's the critical connection. Germany didn't think it was choosing collapse. It thought it was choosing survival. That's what makes this pattern so deadly. No government wakes up and says, "Let's destroy the middle class." They say, "We'll fix it later." But later never comes. And before you dismiss this as ancient or extreme, remember, T's hyperinflation isn't required to do the damage. You don't need wheelbarrows of cash. You don't need prices doubling daily. Sustained inflation, moderate, persistent, and underestimated, is enough. Enough to hollow out savings. Enough to erase upward mobility. Enough to turn stability into illusion. And unlike Germany, the system today is global, digitized, faster, more complex, which means when pressure builds, It spreads. In the next part, we'll connect this directly to the modern dollar, what changed in 1971, why it mattered more than anyone realized, and how it quietly set this entire process in motion decades ago. This is where history stops being history and becomes present tense. August 15th, 1971. A single date, a single decision. President Nixon appeared on TV and said 3 words that no one at the time understood the full weight of: we reclosing gold. The dollar, which had been pegged to gold since Bretton Woods in 1944, instantly became pure paper. Fiat, backed by nothing but trust. At first, nothing seemed to change. Groceries were still on the shelves. Gasoline still flowed. People went to work, paid their bills, and shrugged. But the foundation was gone. Before 1971, every dollar was anchored. It had a tangible value. Savings held meaning. Middle-class planning was logical. After 1971, that anchor disappeared. Slowly at first, then, like a glacier cracking under stress, the cracks spread. Inflation became stealthy. At first, 3%, then 5%, then 10%. Wages rose too, but not enough. Houses doubled in nominal value. Retirement accounts grew, but in real purchasing power, they shrank. And just like Germany, some people profited. Those who owned real estate, those who held stocks. Those who understood debt could ride the wave, while the average saver quietly lost ground every year. The top 1%, they didn't just survive. They consolidated. Every printing cycle, every bailout, every new bond issuance worked in their favor. Meanwhile, the middle class, slowly but relentlessly, their safety nets eroded. And the kicker, most people don't realize it's happening until it's too late. Your neighbor's house doubles in value, your salary rises slightly, and you feel wealthier. But in reality, you're poorer. This wasn't luck. It wasn't accident. It was a system designed to protect wealth concentration while exposing the unprepared to silent destruction. And now, fast forward to today, December 2024. The M2 money supply has exploded. National debt is astronomical. Interest payments are spiraling. The same pattern repeats, but faster, louder, and global. The $90 trillion inflation that loomed in part for ISNT theoretical S, the logical consequence of decades of decisions like Nixon's. History isn't just repeating, it's accelerating. In the next part, we'll break down exactly how the modern dollar is trapped in this 4-stage collapse pattern. Who stands to lose everything? And why the window to act is closing right now. Imagine this. You wake up one morning and everything feels the same. Your salary is deposited, your bills are paid, but something invisible is happening. Your money is quietly losing value every single day. This isn't fear-mongering, it's mathematics. The U.S. is in stage 3 of the 4-stage collapse pattern. Stage 1 and 2, establishing trust and debasing currency, are long past. Stage 3 is where the middle class is crushed, where wealth shifts quietly but decisively from many to few. Look at the numbers. M2 money supply, $21.2 trillion. National debt, $36.2 trillion. Annual deficits exceeding $2 trillion. Interest on the debt climbing past $1.1 trillion. Every dollar printed to service the debt weakens the purchasing power of your hard-earned money. Every new bond bought by the Fed is another wave in the inflation tsunami. But here's the most dangerous part. It's invisible until it hits you. Your house goes up in price. You celebrate, your savings grow nominally. But your real purchasing power, what your money can actually buy, is eroding year after year. The middle class, slowly destroyed. Wages rise 3 to 4%, but real inflation eats 8 to 12%. Retirement plans, devoured. Savings, shrinking. Who benefits? Those holding real assets. Stocks, real estate, businesses, and debt obligations. Inflation acts like a silent transfer mechanism, moving wealth from the middle class to the 1%. And here's the kicker. This pattern is inevitable. Every civilization, every government, Every currency that printed to service unpayable debt followed this exact same script. Rome, Weimar, Germany, Nixon's America. Now, modern America on steroids. The question isn't if this will destroy middle-class wealth, it's how fast it will happen and whether it'll be ready. In Part 8, we'll dive into the specific mechanics of this wealth transfer, showing exactly who gets annihilated, who consolidates wealth, and why timing is everything in surviving this next wave. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Inflation isn't fair. It's a predator, and it knows exactly who to attack. The middle-class wage earners, savers, pensioners are. The first victims, imagine this. A family with $200,000 in net worth today. 10 years of 10% real inflation. That $200,000 buys just $80,000 worth of goods in today's terms. You might feel rich, but you're losing silently every day. Meanwhile, the top 1%. They barely notice. Stocks, real estate, business equity all rise with inflation. Mortgages inflated away. Debts shrink in real terms. Every move they make is protected. Every loss you endure becomes their gain. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's math and history combined. Rome's middle class, gone after 200 years of debasement. Weimar Germany, evaporated in 2. Nixon's America, 50 years of slow motion. Erosion, and we are already in the middle of it. The Fed's balance sheet, $7.4 trillion. Treasury holdings declining among foreign buyers. Deficits surging. Every forced purchase by the Fed prints money that weakens your cash. Now, consider the next decade. Annual deficits hit $2 to $2.5 trillion. M2 grows another $5 trillion. Interest payments soar to $2 trillion annually. By 2034, your real income and savings could be cut nearly in half, even as your paycheck nominally grows. But the top 1%, their wealth balloons. Their assets hedge against inflation, their debts vanish, and their purchasing power explodes. Inflation isn't random, it's a mechanism of wealth extraction. And this is just stage 3. Stage 4, the reset is looming. That's when the old currency is partially replaced. Hyperinflation could strike, or financial repression locks you into a system designed to strip away savings. In Part Webby, we'll map the exact 3 ways the middle class can be destroyed and the 3 ways the wealthy consolidate wealth. By the end, you'll see the blueprint of who survives and who doesn't. Let's get brutally specific. Who loses and who wins when this $90 trillion inflation hits? First, the losers. Retirees on fixed pensions, your lifetime savings. Shrinking in real terms every year. A $50,000 annual pension in 2024 could feel like $20,000 by 2034. Young workers, starting at $50,000 in 2024, real purchasing power could drop to $19,000. Buying a house, forget it. Even a modest home becomes unattainable. Middle-class households, earning $50,000 $20 a sit meal. Sustained inflation erodes wages faster than they rise. Real income plunges 40 to 50%. Net worth plummets. Now, the winners. Top 1% asset holders. Stocks, real estate, business equity, they grow with inflation. A $5 million portfolio could triple nominally, while debt shrinks in real terms. Corporations with pricing power. Companies that raise prices faster than costs. Windfall profits. Think tech giants, energy companies, real estate investors, debtors with large mortgages. Inflation erases their obligations. A $2 million mortgage, real burden slashed to under $800,000. Here's the kicker. This isn't random. Every historical example shows the same pattern. Rome. 200 years of currency. Debasement destroyed the middle class, while elite landowners consolidated power. Weimar Germany, 2 years of hyperinflation wiped out savers. Industrialists and asset holders profited massively. Nixon-era America. 53 years of fiat currency slowly widened the wealth gap. Now, we're at the critical inflection point. $5.8 trillion already printed is moving through the economy. The next $90 trillion over 15 years is mathematically inevitable. By 2035, the middle class could lose 50 to 60% of real purchasing power, while top 1% consolidates unimaginable wealth. But here's the most important question. Is there a way to survive this? In Part 10, we'll reveal the 3 specific strategies to protect your wealth, how to hedge against inflation, and why 2025 to 2027 is your last window to act. Miss it, and the system will leave you behind. This is it, the last chance before the storm hits. Here's how to position yourself on the right side of the $90 trillion wealth transfer. Strategy 1. Convert vulnerable assets into inflation-protected assets. Cash. Destroyed by inflation. Real estate. Hedged, if in appreciating markets. Stocks. Choose companies with pricing power, strong cash flow, and debt-light balance sheets. Precious metals. A time-tested hedge when currencies collapse. Strategy 2. Use debt strategically the way the 1% does. Borrow now at low rates. Pay back later with devalued dollars. Mortgages, business loans, and leveraged investments can become tools for wealth growth if inflation runs 10 to 15% annually. Strategy 3. Position for the next acceleration phase, 2025 to 2027. Don't wait. Once the Fed is forced to buy massive amounts of debt, interest rates will rise, volatility will spike, and opportunities vanish. Liquidate poorly performing assets, shift into inflation-resilient holdings before the middle-class erosion accelerates. Here's the brutal truth. The $90 trillion isn't coming yet, already started. The first $5.8 trillion is moving through the system. The next $15 trillion by 2030 is locked in. By 2040, the middle class will see their purchasing power collapse, while top 1% grows wealth in real terms. History doesn't lie. Rome, Weimar, Nixon. The pattern repeats exactly. And right now, the stage is set. Your move determines whether you survive or get swept away. Every decision counts. Every year counts. Every dollar counts.